Fine. So we had started in the previous session, we saw French Revolution part one, like we completed with the causes of the revolution. So we studied four important causes of this revolution. That is, we covered political causes, we covered economic causes, social causes, role of the influential thinkers in this entire revolution. So all this was covered. So under political causes, we'll just have a quick recap. So under political causes, we studied that the French monarch at that time was Louis XVI. And we saw that how Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, they practiced the divine form of monarchy, how she interfered in all the important official appointments. They basically favored nepotism and they ruled like despotic kings, despotic rulers. So they were quite autocrats. Even the entire machinery was quite corrupt. And we had seen that many people were arrested and confined into jail without any trial. And Bastille, prison of Bastille became the symbol of state oppression. So this we had already covered the political cause. Then we started economic causes. So under economic causes, we saw that because of French involvement in the wars across the world, it resulted into emptying the French treasury. Okay, so that resulted into financial crisis in France. Second thing, we saw that the way French supported America in its revolution. So that resulted into further deepening of the financial crisis. And finally, we saw that how money was spent on the maintenance of the Versailles Palace. Okay, so all this resulted into financial crisis in France. Okay, so that was that all these points we covered under the economic causes of the French Revolution, right? Then we studied the social causes. So this is one of the important factor which we studied, that how the French society was organized in the 18th century, right? So there was an old regime that was there in France. So French society was divided into three estates. First estate included clergymen, that is the people of church. We saw second estate, nobles dominated the second estate, nobility. Then we saw the rest of the common people of the France. They were a part of the third estate. That is bourgeois. Bourgeois means educated and financially better people than the rest of the section. Okay, so bourgeois means businessmen. Then we saw merchants, officials, lawyers. All these they were a part of bourgeois. Then we saw peasants, artisans, landless labor. All this comprised of the third estate. Further, we saw that all the privileges in French. Further, we saw that all the privileges of the French society were enjoyed by first two estates, right? So the first estate, that is dominated by clergymen, churchmen, and the second estate dominated by nobles. All this enjoyed all the privileges by the virtue of their birth in these particular estate, okay? And on the top of that, they did not have any burden of paying taxation. So it was the third estate, those who paid all the taxes. Okay, so all this we had covered. Okay, that was the social cause. Then we saw the struggle to survive. The population of France was increasing. There was a scarcity of food grains. Apart from that, no sufficient measures were taken by the monarch in order to improve the condition, and as a result, it resulted into crisis for survival in France. Then we studied the most important thing was the role of thinkers that inspired this entire revolution. So we saw the role played by John Locke. He was a British philosopher. Then we saw the role played by Rousseau. He gave the famous philosophy of social contract. That is, there's a contract between the people and the representatives. We elect the representatives, and as a result, they have to work for the welfare of the people. Then we saw the important theory given by Montesquieu, that is division of power, right? So there are three wings of government: legislative, executive, and judiciary, and all should be separate from each other, so that the power is distributed across, and that power is not in the hands of any single entity. So all these were the important causes for the French Revolution: political cause, economic cause, social cause, and the role played by the thinkers. Then we saw how France was on the verge of the breakout of the revolution. So we saw that estate general meeting was organized. So in this estate general meeting, first estate had sent 300 representatives. Okay, second estate also sent 300 representatives. Now, when we saw the population of first estate was hardly 1,20,000. So 1,20,000 people of the first estate, that is churchmen, clergymen, were represented by 300 people. We saw the second estate, the population of second estate was approximately the same, 1,30,000. And these 1,30,000 men were represented by 300 representatives. On the other hand, we saw that the population of the third estate was 2.5 crore. And this 2.5 crore people were represented by just 600 representatives, right? So this was the meeting of the body which was called as Estate General, which included the representatives of first class, second class, there is a first estate, second estate, and the third estate, okay? Then we saw what was the issue in this meeting. We saw that the issue was with respect to the system of voting. The system of voting was each estate would cast only one vote. That is the 300 people from the first estate. Unanimously, they will decide what has to be the opinion and they will cast one vote, yes or no. Second estate will give one vote, yes or no, and the third estate will give one vote. And usually the issue was that the decisions used to be in the favor of the first and second estate. Why? Because majority will used to prevail. Out of the three, okay, so three votes used to come, one from first estate, one from second, and one from third estate. But since first two estate, they were always in synchronization with each other, so the ultimate decision used to be in the favor of first two estate, okay? So that we had already covered, and king was not ready to change the system. So the representatives of the third estate, they were of the opinion that this system should be abdicated. Instead of that, one man, one vote, that system should be followed. But since king did not listen, as a result, the representatives of the third estate, they walked out from the meeting of the estate general. Then they went to the tennis court and the oath was taken. So these representatives of the third estate, they declared themselves that we are the true representative of France. They declared themselves as the National Assembly and they took the oath that they are not going to disperse until and unless the French constitution is not drafted. And they took a oath that we are going to frame such a constitution that will limit the powers of the monarch. That is, we saw that how gradually French was proceeding from absolute form of monarchy to constitutional monarchy, where the powers of the monarch were controlled by the French constitution, okay? So this we saw. Then we saw one more important incident that took place, that was the storming of Bastille, right? So Bastille, we saw that it was a state prison. It was the symbol of French oppression, because all the unpopular elements of the French society which were not in synchronization with the first two estate, they were put into this prison of Bastille. So when the situation went out of the control, because of the severe winter, it resulted into affecting the harvest, that resulted into price rise. People used to stand in the long queues for French bread, but the situation was exploited by the capitalists, that is the bakers. They exploited the situation by black marketing, by hoarding the stock, and that resulted into, that escalated the suffering of the people. And ultimately, when they went to the queen for help, she did not listen to the grievances of the common people. Rather, she ordered her soldiers to disperse the people. And people were so angry that the treatment which they meted from the queen resulted into going and storming the prison of Bastille. So they went, so angry mob, agitated, they went, they stormed, they destroyed the prison of Bastille. And then all these people, all the prisoners who were released, who came out of this prison of Bastille, they started attacking the signs of nobility, that is châteaux. So châteaux were the castles of nobles. So these people, these angry people, they attacked on the châteaux, and that was the beginning of the revolution in France, okay? So large nobles, landlords, they were afraid of these attacks, and as a result, they fled from their homes and they managed to escape into the neighboring European countries. Now we see that Louis XVI finally accepted that France was at the verge of revolution, and he had to finally negotiate, reconciliate with his own people, and ultimately he gave the recognition to the National Assembly. So he accepted that the National Assembly, the body which was formed by the third estate, he accepted it as the national parliament of France, and he accepted the principle of constitutional monarchy. That is, he accepted that he henceforth his powers would be checked by the constitution. So ultimately we see that French progressed from absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. This National Assembly passed a decree, passed a law abolishing the feudal system, that is the old regime which existed in France for these many years. That is ultimately the estate system which we saw, first estate, second estate, third estate, was abolished from France, and clergymen, they were forced to give up their privileges. Not only this, several restrictions were imposed on the authority of the church. Okay, so we saw that church used to collect tax called as tithe. Tithe was the charge collected by the clergymen for their upkeep, okay, for their like daily upkeep, and that was abolished. Apart from that, I had mentioned that the church was one of the most reputed institution at that time. It owned lot of property, so all that land which was owned by the church, all was confiscated. So hence French ultimately became a constitutional monarchy. The complete draft of the French constitution was finalized in 1791. Okay, so in 1791, so actually the proper revolt started in 1789. So 1789 mein people revolted, and the king accepted that yes, France is at the verge of revolution. So year of French Revolution, official year of French Revolution is 1789. And in 1791, the Constitution of France was completed, was drafted. This was the first written Constitution of France, which was drafted in 1791. But this was not the first constitution, written constitution of the world, because we have already seen that American Constitution is the first written constitution of the world. So the constitution was ready in 1791. The main intention, the main aim of the constitution was to put a cap, limitations on the powers of the monarch, and other things were also introduced. That we saw the ideals of Montesquieu. They played a very influential role. They decided that the power would not be concentrated into the hands of one person, rather power would be separated and it would be assigned to different institutions. And as a result, three wings of government were born: legislature to frame the laws, executive to implement the laws made by the legislature, and judiciary to interpret the laws and to impart justice to the common people. So ultimately, France implemented the system of separation of powers, and the Constitution of 1971, it gave the power to make laws in the hands of that National Assembly. So we saw that National Assembly was the body of the third estate representatives. This body was declared as the National Assembly, that is the Parliament of France. Okay, but the issue with this was not exactly the issue, but they had kept a limitation on voting, okay, on right to vote. So all the citizens were not given right to vote. So who enjoyed right to vote? A certain voting age was ensured, and that was 25. So only men, those who were 25 and above, who paid taxes. Okay, so taxation was considered to be a criteria in order to impart vote. Okay, so those who all paid taxes equal to at least 3 days labor's wage. Okay, so a particular laborer's wage, uska 3 दिन का जितना wage होता है, उतना tax has been paid, then that person would be given a status of an active status. And if a particular person got a status of active citizen, then and then only he would be entitled to cast a vote. Okay, so now the French population was segregated into two parts: active citizens and passive citizens. So all those citizens who were 25 and above, and those who were paying taxes equivalent to the 3 days of labor's wage, they were given the status of active citizen, and only these active citizens were allowed to cast the vote. Okay, so in this way, the French society was segregated into active citizens, passive citizens. Only active citizens got right to vote, and then they elected 50,000 men, and this 50,000 men finally elected the French Parliament. So basically, French Parliament was not directly elected, it was indirectly elected. If you compare India, Rajya Sabha, right, we have two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Lok Sabha, it is directly elected by the people of India. On the other hand, Rajya Sabha, it's indirectly elected. We elect the members of the state legislative assembly, and then the members of the state legislative assembly elect the members of Rajya Sabha. So on the similar line here, active citizens elected 50,000 men, and these 50,000 men then elected the members of the National Assembly, which functioned as the French parliament with 745 members. And this assembly had control on the powers of the king. Okay, so this was the evolution of New France. Now, the most important document that was drafted in this revolution, that was Declaration of Rights of Man. Okay, so this was a similar document, as we had discussed in the previous session, that French people were quite inspired by American Revolution, and as a result, since during the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson had drafted, just a second, yeah. So during the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson had drafted a document, Declaration of Rights, right, of Americans. So on the similar lines, French people drafted their document, that is Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens. So basically the ideals were that each and every person since we are born as human beings, so by birth we enjoy certain natural rights, being a virtue, as we are born as human beings. Okay, so since we are born as human beings, so by default we should enjoy certain basic rights. So these are called as the basic natural rights. Okay, so like we should all have right to live our life with dignity. Okay, we should have liberty, we should have equality, we should have freedom. So all these things were drafted in this document, and the three noble ideals which came from this document were the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So these ideals, they have been incorporated in Indian Constitution, and the source is French Revolution. Okay, so this document is very important document, Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens, and this not only played an influential role in French society, but also it inspired the other countries of the world, including India. Okay, so this is a very important document which was an outcome of this revolution. Fine. Now let us try to understand the next phase of this revolution. So we saw the first phase where France converted from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy. Now let us try to understand what is the next phase. Now, French King Louis XVI, this person, for the name's sake, he said that I am ready that my powers be limited by the constitution. But at the same time, he was trying to make arrangements by talking to the other European kings. Okay, now this, why he was talking with the other European kings. Now, other European kings, they were also in a state of a fear, because if France became a constitutional monarchy, there was a chance that the same thing might be replicated in the other European countries also, because in the other European countries, they practice monarchy. In Britain, there was a constitutional monarchy, but in the other countries, they were practicing monarchy. So they thought that this might trigger a revolution in other European countries, and where even the other monarchs, they might lose their power, and the other countries would also walk on the same path of the French Revolution, and they would control the power of the respective monarchs. So now Louis XVI, though he signed the constitution, he started entering into secret negotiations with the other European countries, and mainly he went to King of Prussia. So Prussia was a German-speaking state. So at that time, Germany as a country was not there. There were many German-speaking states were there. So he went to Prussian king. Okay, so Prussia was a German-speaking state. So he went to the King of Prussia for help. Okay, so they, apart from that, he also started negotiations with the other neighboring countries, and this plan was revealed to the National Assembly. So National Assembly came to know about the intentions of French monarch Louis XVI, what he is trying to do. On one hand, he is projecting that he has accepted the French constitution, but on the other hand, he is trying to make preparations to regain back the control, to reinstall his position as the absolute monarch of France. And as soon as the National Assembly came to know about this particular plan of French monarch, they took a decision. They voted in April 1792 and declared a war against Prussia and Austria. And thousands of volunteers, they joined the army, French army, against these two countries. And this war was a symbolic war in Europe, because this was not just French people fighting against their monarch. It was against overall monarchy of Europe, because here even Prussia and Austria, they were supporting French king. So it was a war of people against king and against aristocracies across the Europe. And ultimately, we see that it was a defeat of French king. Okay, so Louis XVI was defeated and France was on the verge of becoming republic. Okay, so now there was an elimination of monarchy in France and France became republic. Now, what is the meaning of republic? So we say that India is a republic country. Can anyone tell me what do you exactly mean by the word republic? Hum bolte India is a republic. What does that word signify? Anyone? Yes? Preeti is there? Yashi, Olivia, any idea what do you mean by the word republic?
Ma'am, elected representative.
Exactly. So it means that France may no longer, there will be a hereditary monarch. Now there will be a person who will be elected by the people. So French head would be an elected one. In India, we have president who is an elected entity. So we call India as a republic nation. Okay. So the same thing was now applicable in France. No longer monarchy existed in France. France became a republic. But now we see a new phase of French Revolution. And that is the phase of terror. Okay, so what is the age of terror? So now a new club emerged in France, and that is called as Jacobean Club. Now these, so as soon as monarchy was abolished from France, a power was controlled by Jacobians. So Jacobians are a particular club in France, and these people mainly belong to less prosperous sections of society, like for example shopkeepers, artisans, shoemakers, okay, all these watchmakers, printers, servants. So lowest rungs of the society, you can say, they were a part of this Jacobean club, and the leader was Maximilien Robespierre. Okay, so Maximilien Robespierre was the leader of the Jacobean club, and so power fell. So basically the French parliament, now it came to be known as, earlier it was National Assembly, now it came to be known as National Convention, and this National Convention was dominated by Jacobians. So Jacobians dominated this National Convention, and the leader was Maximilien Robespierre. So now it was the year of 1792, and this there was growing issues in France. The issues were like, we see that Parisians were suffering mainly because of the scarcity of shortage of food, high price, inflation was going on. So these people, okay, these people, they marched towards the palace of Tuileries. Tuileries is a palace near the palace of Versailles, and king was residing over there at that time. So on August 10, they marched towards this palace and they massacred king's guard. So king was in existence. Okay, we are just seeing how we are proceeding towards republic, how France is becoming republic. Okay, so it's a journey of transition from constitutional monarchy to republic. Okay, so with the defeat of the French monarch, power was captured by Jacobians. Jacobians marched towards the king's palace. They massacred the king's guards, and king was arrested. He was kept as a hostage for several hours. Okay, later on we see that the Jacobians, they started overpowering the assembly, that is a national convention, and national convention took a decision that we are going to imprison the entire royal family. Now why? Because they thought that if we will give excuse to the king, agar usko chhod diya, once again he will start preparations, once again he will start negotiations with the other European countries, and he will try to regain the authority. So as a result, now it was decided that we need to completely abolish, eliminate monarchy from France. And we see that this new convention, the new elected assembly, it was, so Jacobians who dominated the National Assembly, they declared that from henceforth all those who are 21 and above, regardless of wealth, they would be given right to vote. And this National Assembly came to be known as National Convention. And this National Convention took the decision on 21st September 1982 that henceforth French would be a republic. Monarchy was completely abolished. Okay, so we'll see that. Now, what was the another decision? So Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre and the Jacobians, they were quite radicals. Okay, they were revolutionaries. They supported terror, and as a result, वो यहाँ पे रुके नहीं. They didn't stop over here. After making France republic, they decided that we are going to sentence to death Louis XVI. So Louis XVI was sentenced to death by the court on the charges of treason, that is going against your own people, going against your own country. And finally, Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, they were guillotined. So guillotine, you know that it's a device which has two blades. So his head was kept and it was pulled down, and as a result it resulted into, like, the king was beheaded. Okay, so king was beheaded, even queen was beheaded, and that is the end of monarchy. Okay, so this was a very sorry fate, this was a very sorry state with which monarchy came to an end. Okay, so not only like they abolished the monarchy, but they completely eliminated monarchy. Okay, so in this way it was a very brutal end of the French monarchy. Fine. So once again we'll see this. Here we covered this entire part, that is Declaration of Rights of Men. After that we saw that how king was trying to make negotiations with the neighboring countries. He entered into secret pacts, he started taking the help of Prussia, and how National Assembly came to know about the intentions of the king and how they declared war against Prussia and Austria. So we saw that in this war ultimately French monarch was defeated. After this we saw that Jacobians, they rose to power in French society. So they started controlling the important decisions, and they were headed by the leader of Jacobians was Maximilien Robespierre, right? Maximilien Robespierre. The people were frustrated. Why they were frustrated? Because of the inflation and shortage of food. As a result, they marched towards the king's palace, massacred his bodyguards, and then imprisoned the king. And finally, we see that Jacobians, they overpowered the National Assembly, and they declared that everyone who is 21 and above will get right to vote regardless of the wealth. And finally, a new elected assembly came to be formed, and that is known as National Convention. So from National Assembly, which was an indirectly elected, French moved towards a directly elected body, National Convention. And on 21st September 1792, monarchy was abolished, France became republic, and finally we saw the fate of French monarchy. Both husband, wife, king and queen were executed. Now here the things did not stop. We see that now begins the reign of terror. So 1793, that is after the death of monarch, 1793 to 1794, this period in French society is called as Age of Terror or Reign of Terror. Now why? Because the one who controlled the power, Robespierre, the one who controlled the power, and this entire group, Jacobian club, these were radicals, these were revolutionaries, and as a result they followed the principle of strict punishment and strict control. So all those whom they saw as the enemies of the French Republic, that is all the ex-clergymen, all the nobles, members of the other political parties, or even the members of their own party who disagreed with their methods, all these were executed. That is, they were tried by the revolutionary tribunal, and even the tribunal was dominated by these men only. And if the court found any nobles, any clergymen as guilty, everyone met with the same fate, that is guillotine. A person was beheaded. So that guillotine became a very famous device in this reign of terror, and everyone, all the opponents were beheaded. So Robespierre and all his supporters, they basically use such a throughout this entire phase of 1 year, they use such strict, severe measures, and that further resulted into instability in the country. Why do we expect a revolution to happen? For a good thing, in order to replace the old system and to bring a new system which is much more peaceful, which will give you a stability and assured future. But then what we are seeing, even though the monarchy was abolished, even though French became republic, there was no political stability because terror continued and people were frustrated with these policies of Robespierre. And ultimately, even the supporters of Robespierre, they now finally requested him for moderation. But Robespierre didn't listen. He didn't budge, and he continued with his reign of terror. And ultimately, people went against Robespierre. His own supporters went against him, and court finally declared that Robespierre to be arrested, and he also met with the same fate, that is, even he was guillotined. Okay, so this entire phase is called as the phase of terror. Fine. So now we see that, so this is the end of the Jacobean government. So now with the end of the Jacobean government, power went into the hands of wealthier middle classes. So wealthier middle classes, they seized the power. But even this resulted, and this wealthier middle class, their rule is called as a rule of directory. So we saw first National Assembly. Okay, then we saw National Convention being dominated by Jacobians, okay, Robespierre, Maximilian Robespierre. Then we see that fall of the Jacobian government, and we are heading towards a phase where a new government is born in the French Republic, which is controlled by the wealthier middle class sections. And this form of republic came to be known as Directory. But unfortunately, even this Directory could not assure political stability. So again, it resulted into political instability in France, and ultimately people were frustrated. So we see that there was one guy throughout this revolution. There was one person, Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte, throughout this French Revolution, earlier in the early phase, he was an ordinary soldier. But eventually, with his extraordinary skills and powers, he rose to the position of military commander. And now people were frustrated with this political instability. They wanted an extraordinary person with all intelligent capability who would assure a good nation, or basically good reforms in France. And ultimately, from this republic, this entire chaos paved a path for a new form of government, and that was a form of military dictatorship and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. So around 1802, we see that Napoleon Bonaparte became the head, the monarch of, not monarch, the dictator of French Empire. And this person, now when we talk about Napoleon Bonaparte, so he officially, when he came to power, he officially declared that this is the end of revolution. So with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, we see that in 1802, 1803, it marks the end of French Revolution. So things didn't stop over here. It means that, yes, Napoleon Bonaparte definitely, he tried to introduce many good things in France. Okay, so Napoleon Bonaparte, he introduced changes in the French government, but the changes were, you can say, a mixture of old and new. Okay, so what is old and new? So old thing is that he introduced a centralized form of government. Okay, so where power was not separated between the wings of government, power was concentrated in the hands of a single authority, and that was Napoleon Bonaparte. So he became a center of power. Okay, so that was a one thing which he introduced. So that was an old thing only. Earlier, monarch had control of the power. Now Napoleon Bonaparte, dictator, had the control of power. So that was introduced. But yes, he introduced new things also. He gave fraternity, he gave liberty to the French people, equality. But yes, certain laws were quite conservative when it came to women. Okay, so though liberty and though fraternity was ensured, we cannot say France was completely equal. Okay, when it came to equality, because women were discriminated to a certain extent. Okay, but with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, people were happy. Why people were happy? Because whatever they wanted, that was given to them. Okay, so whatever they aspired for, because for these many years, French people suffered instability, years of instability, years of terror. But now at least there was a stability in France. There was some assurance of a good form of government. And this marks the new journey of France. Now, what is the new journey of France under Napoleon? Napoleon was a great military commander, and now he started attacking the neighboring countries in Europe. And one by one, like when it comes to dictator, like in the further sessions, we'll be studying about Hitler. So the basic intention of any dictator is to expand the territory. Same was done by Napoleon. And now we see that France was not a one small nation. It became a big empire. So one by one, Belgium, Switzerland, Spain, Holland, Belgium, all that countries, they came under the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte. So it results into the beginning of a big French empire. Okay, but then the people in this empire, okay, Spanish people and the other people, they didn't like the way being controlled by Napoleon Bonaparte, and slowly and gradually we see that many wars begin against Napoleon. Okay, so French people, one by one, all the countries, those who had become a part of a Napoleonic Empire, that is the French Republic or the French Empire, they started revolting against Napoleon. So we see that Spain. So Spain was under the control of Napoleon's brother. So Napoleon had deployed great forces in Spain, and he had appointed his brother to control over Spain. But the people of Spain were not ready to accept any foreign rule. So as a result, we see that Spanish people revolted, and much of the energy of Napoleon was channelized in suppressing these revolts. Okay, so one by one, many countries revolted against Napoleon, and we see that slowly and gradually Napoleon became a threat to the survival of Britain. And we see that Britain now organized troops of the neighboring countries, and a battle started against Napoleon. So Napoleon was defeated and he was exiled in Italy. Okay, so then also he managed to escape from Italy, and final concluding battle was fought, that was Battle of Waterloo. So in 1814, in